Hey, good afternoon. There's a new batch of polls that just came out from Atlas Intel that's causing a little bit of shockwaves in the industry. The reason why they have Trump +3 in Pennsylvania, Trump +4 in Michigan, Trump +2 in Wisconsin. So I thought I would look at a breakdown of a couple of those states to try to take a deeper dive into this poll and see, is this poll an outlier or is this more accurate reflection predictor of what's going to happen on the election. So historically, these three states have been difficult to poll. Historically, these three states in 2016 and 2020, the aggregate poll data from all the polls leading into election day had were underestimating Trump's performance. So another way to look at this is Trump has overperformed or beat the predictions in the polls in these three so-called blue wall states. This polling firm, being one of the more accurate ones, has Trump ahead in the three blue wall states, and their methodology might be a clue to why they might be more accurate, or maybe they're an outlier and oversampling demographics in Trump's favor. So let's take a look at the polling data. I want to start actually by looking at the Michigan. They have Trump +4 in Michigan, and the demographic data is here on how they've polled. Here we go. Do kind of a split screen. So Michigan in this polling data here, so I'm going to just make this large. Here's the breakdown. These demographics are important to understand whether or not your poll is sampling correctly. For example, if you only polled young college-educated people in an urban context, that's not going to be representative of the state at large. If you only polled rural farmers that were 50 plus, that's not going to be representative of the entire sample size. So what polling firms try to do is they actually grab a lot of data from a large sample size and then they weight it to make sure that it reflects the demographics of the state or what they feel will be the likely turnout. The challenge with this that polling firms have is you can try to represent in your polling data census data breakdown on these demographics or even voter affiliation, party registration data. And by the way, not all states share the same amount of information, so it becomes a little bit challenging. And even if you get what you think is an accurate reflection, turnout might be different. You might have higher or lower turnout among a certain demographic group. For example, if you look here, you might get more middle and older voters turning out disproportionate to the breakdown in this study. I can tell you right now, as the clerk for Canyon County, when you look at voter registration breakdown, the 65 plus group disproportionately outvotes the younger group relative to their share of the voter registration, meaning voter turnout is going to be a higher percent for that older group. And while you have a lot of younger registered voters, the voter turnout among that demographic group is smaller. So here's one of the challenges when you do polls is, do you want your polling data to reflect what you have on the voter registration breakdown, or do you look at patterns of behavior and turnout behavior to alter and to weight your polling demographics in a way that is different from what's objectively on paper, but maybe more reflective of what the actual results will be or the outcome would be. And plus, if you try to model it off what happened 4 years ago, and this is what a lot of polling industry polling firms do, is they're trying to look at 4 years ago as the baseline to mirror the demographics off, and that's not going to accurately capture or reflect changes, that the winds that are moving the sails in a different direction. And if you're trying to replicate 4 years ago and you don't accurately reflect what's happening, then you have a surprise on election day and say, oh, look what happened. We missed this. And then what you do for the next 4 years is you use that as the baseline, and you don't really, well, here's the challenge, is it's hard to kind of predict what those trends are. You have to wait until it actually happens to say, oh, look what happened. We're going to take this data and use it as we move forward. And so it's not an exact science on the trends. You try to get a sense of what's going to happen, and maybe you think the intuition or the sense, or there's other demographic data that's suggesting a swing that will allow someone to make a prediction about what the outcome is going to be, different from just what the objective data is from the Secretary of State's website, for example, on voter demographics. And you know, it's a bold thing to kind of stand out and say, you know what, here's the data, but I think this is what's going to happen. So you're kind of taking the science, and you're also, you know, combining it with some guesswork, but based on hopefully some trend lines based on things that you see happening. So I know that's a mouthful, but that's maybe the longest I'm going to explain what the challenges are in the polling industry relative to trying to make sense of what's going on. I'm going to move my screen over here. So when you look at this demographic data, you know, they have Republicans representing 33% of their respondents, Democrats at 29%, Independents at 38%. I think that this is off, and I'm going to pull up an exit poll from 2020. We're looking at Michigan. Okay, here we go. Michigan. Move my back here. So let's look at the exit polls in Michigan 2020. What happened in 2020? Here we go. There we go. That line right there. Democrats were 38% of the respondents. In the exit poll for Michigan 2020, Republicans were 38% and Independents were 23%. This is a pretty reliable exit poll that was done in the 2020 presidential election in Michigan. And they had Democrats and Republicans even, and Independents were at 23%. So when you look at the polling data here, they have Republicans at a +4 representation over Democrats in this polling data, and they have Independents at a pretty high chunk at 38%. Now, this might be reflecting changes from 4 years ago, but it's hard to confirm because Michigan is a state that does not provide party affiliation data as a public record. So this polling firm might be getting a sense of things that have changed. Certainly, you can look at other states like Arizona, Pennsylvania, which does do party affiliation breakdown. Republicans have made gains relative to the Democrats. That very well could be happening in Michigan, and this breakdown in their sample size is reflecting that change in demographics, and partly why they have Trump about +4 in this poll is because Republicans have grown as part of the share. But to have Independents at 38%, that's a really large chunk relative to the exit poll data from 4 years ago. So I find this breakdown slightly a little suspect. And even if you were to weight this back to say, okay, let's say Republicans and Democrats, you were to even up the preference here and close that 4% gap, that means Trump winning by 4% in this poll might be closer to a wash. That would be an adjustment based on an assumption that 4 years ago is the baseline. So going back to what I said at the beginning in the intro, you could make some mistakes by assuming the baseline as sort of the fixed state in which you measure what's happening today and not actually capture the trends. This might be actually capturing the trends. I haven't seen anything to suggest Democrats have grown relative to Republicans. So worst case scenario, if you were to move the weighting in this poll even between Democrats and Republicans, Trump's 4-point victory in this poll probably becomes more like a tie. That would be more like a worst case scenario. And the best case scenario is this data is reflecting what's going on in Michigan, and Trump is ahead by +4. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit and look at the demographic breakdowns, because I think there's a nugget here to suggest why the Trump camp should be pretty happy. So here you see Trump's ahead 50.4 to 46.6, not quite 4 points, 3.8. Scroll down a little bit more. There's some demographics here. This is gold here, I think. The independent, which I think they oversample here at 38%. The independents are breaking Trump at 47.6 to Harris 45.3. That is a good sign if Trump's winning the independents. The question here on the 2020 vote, and it looks a little bit weird as far as how to read this, and I'll try to explain it, and hopefully it makes sense. This is a key, I think, where the Trump camp would be very encouraged. The Harris camp is probably very frustrated and frightened. And there's two things. The International Teamsters released a poll, million plus straw poll, and they support Trump by a very large margin over Harris. The same poll, when it was Biden and Trump in the race, had Biden winning, meaning there's been a softening of Teamster union worker support has shifted from Biden to Trump. They are not connecting with Harris. Harris is not connected with these people. And you'll see it here with the group of people that they polled. They asked, how did they vote in 2020? And if you look right here, Joe Biden supporters in 2020, meaning these people who voted for Joe Biden, now support 8% of the Biden voters support Donald Trump. 88.4% of the Biden supporters support Kamala Harris. Now, when you look at the Trump voters from 2020, 96.7 are still in the Trump camp. 3.2 of the Trump voters in 2020 say they're voting for Harris. And then those who are polled that did not vote in 2020, so they're either new voters or they just skipped the 2020 election. Look at this. They support Trump 46% to Harris 41.5. This tells me that there is a very real shift and swing that's occurring, especially among the working class, blue collar demographics in Michigan. In fact, when you look up here at the family income breakdown, Trump is winning the below 50K demographic. He's also winning the 50 to 100K. The middle class is his strongest group of support in the three income brackets. So you see that? Trump is 53.1 to Harris 45.3 among the middle income, blue collar, working class families of Michigan. Trump has a very big lead. Interestingly, the 100K plus, the wealthy, they support Harris 52.2 to Trump's 46.7. But for Trump to be winning the 50K below and the 50 to 100K class suggests to me that Trump is connecting with the middle class, blue collar worker of Michigan. There is a change in the demographics occurring. And the fact that 8% of the people who voted for Biden in 2020 now say they're voting for Trump is a concerning trend, I'm sure, for the Harris camp. They can't afford to lose Biden voters in 2020 going to Trump, but this poll is suggesting that that's what's happening. This poll is also suggesting that the new voters who did not vote in 2020, they are supporting Trump by 4.5 points over. That suggests to me that, remember, they are weighting Republicans by a +4 margin in this polling data. There are new people who are registered to vote now, and you do see in this question that they're supporting Trump more likely. Now, that might be causal because they're sampling people who are increasingly more Republican, but I think they're oversampling independents at 38%. And so this trend line is also probably capturing some of those independents, but it's definitely a trend that is working in Trump's favor. When you look at the polling data, and I want to close with this, in 2020 exit poll data, but the polling averages in 2020 as it got closer to the election it was predicting Biden to win by about 6 points. Okay. Biden actually ended up winning by less than 3 points. So in order for Trump to win, he needs to close that gap of about 3 points. Okay. And this new poll that has Trump by about +4 is a huge swing. That's a 7% swing. Some might view it slightly as an outlier. Maybe they're oversampling Republicans a little bit. But even if you were to do some adjustments to create the baseline from last year, you can see that there is still a very real swing from the 2020 results to 24, especially with Biden voters moving to Trump, new voters who didn't vote in 2022 preferring Trump, the 50K below and the middle income brackets preferring Trump. There is something going on in Michigan, and that's why I continue to hold firm in my prediction that Trump is going to win Michigan. So we'll keep an eye on more polls as they come out, but right now I think that this poll is pretty accurate in suggesting that Trump will win Michigan.